Picture this. A 68-year-old farmer walks into his kitchen after morning chores and finds a business card on the table. Not just any business card, a Walmart card. Corporate blue logo, embossed letters. The kind of card that means money, serious money. The kind that changes everything. Vernon Hendrickson picked it up, turned it over, and saw his son's handwriting scrawled on the back. Called. Meeting scheduled Tuesday 10 a.m. And just like that, 43 years of family farming was about to explode. Vernon had been working this land since 1952 when he came home from Korea, and his father handed him 800 acres of black dirt in Minnesota. Good corn ground, good soybean ground. Nothing fancy, but it fed the family, put 3 kids through college, survived the farm crisis of the 80s when half his neighbors went bankrupt and lost everything. Vernon had kept the operation small, kept expenses tight, and by 1995, he had the land paid off completely. Zero debt except an operating line he settled every fall. That was success by his measure. But his son Craig saw things differently, and that business card was about to prove it. Craig was 37 years old. He'd left the farm for the Twin Cities right after college in 1982, started a construction company, made what Vernon considered good money for 7 years. Then the recession hit in 1990, and Craig's business collapsed like a house of cards. 6 months later, his marriage followed. Craig came home in spring 1989 with a pickup truck, $3,000 cash, and no plan except to help out for a while. That was 6 years ago. The helping out had become permanent, though they'd never discussed terms, never talked about the future, never formalized anything. Craig drove tractor. Vernon made decisions. That's how it worked, until the Walmart card changed everything. Vernon walked out to the machine shed where Craig was welding a repair on the disc harrow, and when his son lifted the hood, Vernon kept his voice carefully neutral. "Walmart want to buy something?" Craig pulled off his gloves. "They're expanding, looking at locations for a supercenter. Regional manager wants to talk about our South Quarter." Our South Quarter. Vernon repeated those words slowly, tasting the claim his son was making. "The one that touches Highway 15? Craig nodded. "And you scheduled a meeting without talking to me." But Vernon could already hear it in his son's voice, interest and possibility. The thing he'd feared since Craig came home, broke and divorced. That Craig saw the farm as exit money, not legacy. What happened next was based on documented patterns that occurred across rural Minnesota and Iowa during the mid-1990s, when Walmart's super expansion strategy collided head-on with family farm succession planning. Every economic trend, every corporate land acquisition tactic, every family conflict you're about to hear reflects what really happened when big box retail discovered that rural highway frontage was cheaper and more strategic than anyone realized. The amounts, the timelines, the devastating choices, all of it happened to real families during this era. And what Vernon and Craig were about to face would test everything they thought they knew about family, farming, and what land actually means. Tuesday morning came. Vernon insisted on being at the meeting, though Craig had clearly hoped to meet the Walmart representatives alone. 2 men arrived. Patterson, the regional real estate manager in a tie with a leather portfolio, and a local broker from Hutchinson who'd evidently been scouting properties. Patterson spread a county plat map on the kitchen table. "We're looking at a site for our next Minnesota supercenter along the Highway 15 corridor. Your South Quarter fits our parameters perfectly." He pointed to the 40-acre parcel bordering the highway. "Direct access, good visibility, exactly the right distance from our existing stores." Vernon said nothing. Craig leaned forward. "What kind of offer are we talking about?" Patterson smiled, and that smile should have been a warning. "We're prepared to offer $3,000 per acre for that 40. That's $120,000. Vernon felt that number like a punch to the chest. $3,000 per acre. More than double what farmland was trading for. The South 40 was good ground. They'd averaged 168 bushels of corn per acre on it last year. But at current corn prices, that meant maybe $300 per acre gross income. It would take 100 years of farming to equal what Walmart was offering right now. Cash on the barrel, and Craig was doing the same math. Vernon could see it in his son's eyes. The calculation, the possibility, the escape. Craig spoke carefully. That's a generous offer. Patterson nodded. It reflects the property's development value. We're not buying farmland, we're buying a strategic location. And then Vernon spoke for the first time, his voice level and hard. What happens to the rest of the farm? Patterson looked surprised by the question. The rest of your property is yours to keep. We only need the 40 acres. You'd still have 760 acres. More than enough to continue farming. But Vernon saw what Patterson didn't. Continue farming what? That South 40 is part of a field. You put a parking lot there. You cut off access to another 100 acres behind it. You bring in that much traffic on a county road that wasn't built for it. You light up the night sky. You affect everything around it. Patterson had smooth answers about road improvements and county ordinances, and how selling development frontage actually improves farm operations. Then he dropped the hammer. And frankly, Mr. Hendrickson, $3,000 per acre isn't a negotiation range. This is our number. Craig looked at his father, wanting him to be reasonable, wanting him to see opportunity. Vernon stood up. Thank you for coming. We'll need to discuss this. After the Walmart people left, the real battle began. They sat at the kitchen table in silence except for the wall clock ticking, the same clock that had been there since 1965. Finally, Craig spoke. We should seriously consider this. Vernon poured more coffee. Should we? Not a question. A statement loaded with 43 years of sole control. Craig pressed forward. Dad, that's $120,000. We could pay off equipment, build a new machine shed, update irrigation, invest in the farm. And there it was, the word that divided them. Invest in the farm, Vernon repeated. Or take the money and run? Craig's face went hard. That's not fair. But Vernon was past fair. Isn't it? You came back here 6 years ago with nothing. No plan, no commitment. Just helping out for a while. Now Walmart waves money and suddenly you're scheduling meetings, making decisions about land that's been in this family since 1952. Craig stood up so fast, his chair scraped. Land that you've never once indicated would be mine. Land that you control completely while I work for nothing except room and board, like a hired hand. The truth hit the table between them like a thrown wrench. Vernon had never formalized anything, never discussed succession, never given Craig any reason to believe the farm would be his. Just assumed Craig would wait patiently while Vernon maintained complete control until he died or couldn't farm anymore. Craig had been working alongside his father for 6 years with no partnership, no ownership, no future except what Vernon chose to give him when Vernon decided to give it. You want commitment. Vernon's voice rose. You want skin in the game? Then act like it. Don't go sneaking around setting up meetings to sell off pieces of this farm. But Craig wasn't backing down. I set up a meeting to listen. You're the one who won't even hear the offer. You're the one so terrified of change you can't see an opportunity that could actually help us. The argument escalated until Craig said the words that broke something. Maybe I should have stayed in the cities. At least there I had a business that was mine. Vernon's response was cold. Doors still open. Craig left, just walked out of the kitchen, got in his truck and drove away. Vernon sat at the table listening to the clock tick, realizing he might have just pushed his son away permanently over 40 acres and a Walmart parking lot. But here's what Vernon didn't know yet. Craig didn't go far. He drove to the county recorder's office in Glencoe and started pulling land records, looking at recent transactions, studying what Walmart had actually paid other farmers. And what he found made his blood run cold. Every farmer who had sold highway frontage to Walmart in the past 2 years had later sold their entire operation within 18 months. Every single one. The supercenter didn't just buy 40 acres. It destroyed the viability of the remaining farmland. Traffic problems, access issues, light pollution, property tax reassessments on adjacent parcels. The farmers who thought they were getting development money and keeping their operation discovered, they'd actually just started a slow-motion demolition of everything they'd built. Craig sat in his truck in the parking lot reading transaction records and realized Vernon had been right, but for reasons neither of them had articulated. This wasn't about legacy versus cash. This was about Walmart's strategy of buying the minimum land legally necessary while making the remaining property unfarmable, then coming back 18 months later to buy the rest at agricultural prices instead of development prices. It was calculated. It was documented. It was happening across rural Minnesota. Craig drove back to the farm at sunset. Vernon was in the machine shed, which is where he always went when he was upset, and Craig found him organizing tools that didn't need organizing. Neither of them spoke for a long minute. Then Craig put the county land records on the workbench. "You need to see this." Vernon looked at the documents, traced the pattern Craig had found, saw what Walmart had done to the Anderson farm in 1993, the Meyer operation in 1994, the Schultz place just last year. Same playbook, same results. Sell the highway frontage, watch your farm die slowly, sell the rest at fire sale prices. "I was wrong," Craig said quietly. "You were right about not selling, but we were both wrong about everything else." Vernon set down the papers. "I never gave you a reason to stay, never made you a partner, never treated this like it could be yours." The admission cost him something. Craig nodded. "And I scheduled that meeting because I was looking for an exit, not because I wanted to invest in the farm. Because I wanted out." There it was. The truth between them, raw and painful. Vernon had held on too tight. Craig had never fully committed. The farm had been caught between a father who wouldn't let go and a son who wasn't sure he wanted to grab hold. And Walmart had nearly destroyed them by exposing that fracture. "We need a real partnership," Craig said. "Legal, formal, equal decision-making on major issues, ownership transfer over time." Vernon was silent for a long moment. 43 years of sole control screaming against the idea. But he looked at his son and saw something he'd been missing. Craig hadn't been resisting farming. Craig had been resisting being an employee with no voice, no future, no stake. "We'll need a lawyer," Vernon finally said. "Draw up proper papers, partnership agreement, succession plan, everything legal." Craig exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 6 years. "And we tell Walmart no?" Vernon smiled for the first time in 2 days. "We already told them no. I just didn't explain why thoroughly enough." 3 weeks later, they met with Patterson one final time. Craig did the talking. He spread the county land records on the same kitchen table where the original offer had been made. "We found an interesting pattern in your previous acquisitions. Every farmer who sold you highway frontage subsequently sold their entire operation within 18 months. Everyone. Which means you're not buying 40 acres. You're buying 800 acres on an installment plan, paying development prices for the first 40 and agricultural prices for the rest after you've made it impossible for us to farm around your supercenter." Patterson's face went carefully neutral. "That's an interesting theory." But Craig wasn't done. "Here's our counteroffer. You want the South 40, you pay development prices for every acre that becomes unfarmable because of your operation. We calculate that at 220 acres minimum, at $3,000 per acre, that's $660,000. Or you can look elsewhere for your supercenter location. Patterson and the broker left without another word. Walmart built their supercenter 8 miles down Highway 15 on a different property, and Vernon and Craig went to see a lawyer about partnership papers. The formal agreement they created was revolutionary for 1995. Equal decision-making on major purchases and land transactions. Profit sharing based on contribution. A 5-year ownership transfer schedule where Vernon would gradually deed land to Craig in structured increments, minimizing gift taxes while ensuring succession. Everything they should have discussed 6 years ago. Everything that would have prevented the crisis, put down in black and white and signed by both of them. But the real change was deeper than paperwork. They started farming differently. Craig wanted to try grid soil sampling, a new technology that mapped nutrient levels across fields to optimize fertilizer application. Vernon was skeptical, but agreed to test it on one field. The results showed the South 40 needed more potassium than they'd been applying. They adjusted. That fall, the same 40 acres Walmart had wanted to pave averaged 183 bushels per acre, 12 bushels better than their 5-year average. 12 bushels times 40 acres times $250 per bushel meant an extra $1,200 from one field in 1 year, more than the soil sampling cost. Data was good when you paid attention to it, Vernon admitted. They enrolled in university extension programs on precision agriculture, attended county meetings where fathers and sons from other farms were navigating the same generational transitions. Vernon found himself learning not just about technology, but about collaboration, about listening, about recognizing that his way wasn't the only way. They finished harvest that fall earlier than they'd finished in years, with both of them running equipment at full capacity, with better planning, with shared decision-making that let them respond faster to weather and conditions. They were more efficient. The bins were full. Corn averaged 172 bushels across the whole farm. Soybeans hit 51. At current prices, they cleared about $120,000 net for the year. $60,000 each. Partners, Craig said, looking at the farm management analysis. Partners, Vernon agreed. The same amount Walmart had offered for 40 acres, except this was annual income from 800 acres they still owned, still controlled, still farmed together. But the story doesn't end there, because spring planting came, and they faced their first real test as legal partners. Craig wanted to try variable rate fertilizer application using yield monitor data to build prescription maps, apply more fertility in areas that needed it, less where the soil was already rich. Vernon was skeptical. Start with one field, he suggested. Run at variable rate, run another field flat rate like always. Compare results. Proper experiment. Craig smiled. I like it. That's how it worked now. Not Vernon deciding. Not Craig pushing back. Two partners working through decisions together, testing new ideas against traditional methods, finding what actually worked best for their specific operation on their specific land. One evening in March, they were in the shop replacing row units on the planter, upgrading seed meters, getting ready for an early planting season. Craig was under the planter frame wrenching on mounting bolts. Vernon was handing him tools. You ever regret it? Craig asked from under the planter. Turning down the Walmart deal? Could have had the money. Vernon thought about it. No, money is temporary. Land is permanent. Family is permanent. Or should be. Craig slid out, wiped grease off his hands. I regret signing it initially. I regret not trusting that you'd do right by me. I regret choosing money over patience. Vernon handed him a different wrench. You had reason to doubt. I'd given you nothing solid to trust. They looked at each other in the fluorescent shop lights. Two men 31 years apart, connected by blood and now by choice, by partnership, by the recognition that real farming Sustainable farming? Family farming required more than one person's vision or control. It required collaboration, trust, shared commitment to something bigger than individual ambition. The 1996 growing season would be their first as legal partners. Not father and hired son, not owner and employee. Partners, equals building something together that honored the past without being imprisoned by it, that embraced the future without abandoning tradition. It wouldn't be perfect. They'd still argue, still disagree, still have moments where the generational gap felt uncrossable. But they'd do it together on land that stayed in the family because both of them had decided that was worth fighting for. And here's what makes this story matter beyond just Vernon and Craig. In the mid-90s, this exact scenario played out on farms across rural America. Corporate development meeting family legacy. Every family had to find their own answer. Some sold, some didn't. Some families split apart over the decision. Some families found ways to stay together. There was no single right answer, but there were lessons learned. Hard lessons about communication, about formalization, about not waiting until crisis forces conversations that should have happened years earlier. The farms that survived weren't necessarily the ones that refused to sell. They were the ones that had actual succession plans in place before outside money came calling. The ones that had formalized partnerships, documented agreements, clear communication about who owned what and who made decisions about what. The farms that failed weren't just the ones that sold to Walmart. They were the ones that had been operating on assumptions and traditions and unspoken expectations until pressure exposed how fragile those foundations really were. Vernon and Craig's story could have ended differently. Craig could have signed that purchase agreement. Vernon could have refused to compromise on partnership terms. The farm could have been sold, the family split, the land paved over for parking spaces and shopping carts. Instead, it became a case study in how crisis can force necessary change, how conflict can lead to stronger foundations if both parties are willing to do the hard work of actually talking to each other, actually formalizing what should have been formalized years ago. But let me ask you this. Did your family face a moment like this, when outside money came calling with an offer that could have changed everything? When succession planning turned into conflict? When the question became not whether to sell, but what you were really doing farming in the first place? Were you the father holding on, or the son pushing for change? Tell me in the comments, because these weren't isolated incidents. This was happening everywhere during the 90s, corporate expansion meeting agricultural tradition, and every family had to navigate it somehow. If you lived through it, your lessons are worth sharing. If you're living through it now, Vernon and Craig's story might help you see the pattern before it destroys what you're trying to build. So leave a comment, tell your story, and if you want more deep dives into the moments that shaped modern farming, the impossible choices families had to make under pressure, the history that matters because it's still happening, hit that subscribe button right now. Because the history of American agriculture isn't just about crops and equipment and commodity prices. It's about families making impossible choices under extraordinary pressure. It's about fathers and sons trying to figure out how to work together when everything in the culture tells them one person has to be in charge. It's about land that means more than money because it represents generations of work, sacrifice, identity, and the question of who you are when you're standing in a field your grandfather cleared in 1920. Vernon and Craig figured it out. Your family might be figuring it out right now. These stories matter. These lessons matter. And if you don't share them, if we don't document how families navigated this transition from traditional agriculture to modern operations, we lose something essential about who we are and where we came from. So, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to comment. And don't forget that every farm family's story is part of a bigger story about what we're willing to fight for when the easy money comes calling and the hard choices have to be made. Because in the end, Vernon and Craig didn't just save a farm. they saved a relationship. They built a partnership that honored both tradition and change. And that's the real story behind the Walmart business card that almost destroyed everything.